Thank you everybody for being with us today for our virtual member speaker series. I'm delighted so many of you are here, and I'm delighted to welcome Colin Wellenkamp to learn more about his incredible organization. Before we begin, I'd like to remind you of a few upcoming events. First of all, we have Chinese Culture Days this weekend, August 7th and 8th. On Saturday and Sunday, we'll celebrate Chinese music, art, dance, and food with a full schedule of events. Member tickets are half off, so that's $8 each for adults. Member children are free. And of course, our festival level members get 6 free tickets for the weekend. Though it's not required, you can order your tickets in advance online or through the membership office. Chinese Culture Days is just one of our 3 weekend festivals coming up. Of course, Japanese Festival returns over Labor Day weekend, and my favorite, Best of Missouri Market, will be back on the first weekend of October, October 1st, 2nd, and 3rd. We are monitoring the current CDC and local health ordinances, and we'll keep you posted through the e-news and on-site of any changes to those events. As it stands now, you do not need to reserve tickets in advance, and we will ask that you wear masks indoors at the garden, outdoors when social distancing is not possible, or of course at your own choice. As for the speaker series, we just opened up registration for next month's virtual event. On September 14th at 11 a.m., we will welcome Kimberly Lovelace Hainsfurther, who's president of Forest Keeling Nursery. Kimberly will be talking about planting native trees and shrubs. Like Colin today, Kim will be joining us on Zoom from the field. In Kim's case, that will be from her fantastic nursery in Ellsbury, Missouri. Registration for that speaker series, like all others, is available online, or you can always call the phone number on the back of your membership card. Now it's my pleasure to introduce Colin Wellenkamp, who is, through the wonders of Zoom and an absolutely gorgeous August day, joining us from the confluence of the Mississippi and Missouri rivers. Colin is the Executive Director of the Mississippi River Cities and Towns Initiative. Through his work with the initiative and in his extensive career in the legal and policy fields, Colin has been focused on advancing public interest through improving local government and the activity of the business world, and on sustainability. Colin has a BA in Environmental Studies from St. Louis University, a JD from Creighton University School of Law, and a Master of Law in Sustainable Development Law from George Washington University Law School. Colin is a native of Missouri. He lives in St. Charles with his wife and daughters, one of whom is joining him today at Confluence Park. As I mentioned, Colin's on the banks of the river, so there's no PowerPoint presentation. He will be doing a talk, and then we'll do Q&A at the end of the program. As always, use the Q&A function to type your questions, and I'll be back on to moderate when Colin is through. Thank you so much. And Colin, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Thank you, Kate. Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the confluence of the Mississippi River and Missouri rivers, the 2 largest rivers in the North American continent, 2 of the largest rivers in the world, ranking about number 5 and number 7 are right here. They meet right here. If those folks are familiar with the renowned sculpture in front of Union Station in downtown St. Louis, the marriage of the Mississippi and the Missouri, well, here it is. This is the wedding ceremony right here. And this is my PowerPoint. Decided to do a natural PowerPoint for you. God makes the best slides, I have to say. And so I am coming to you live from Confluence State Park, right across from Hartford, Illinois. Hartford's right over there. And St. Louis as well, right down there. And if you go up that way, you'll go to the Dakotas and into Montana. And if you go that way, you will go get to New Orleans, Louisiana. I am the Executive Director of the Mississippi River Cities and Towns Initiative. It is a pleasure to be with you today. Very much looking forward to this. Huge fan of the Botanical Garden, one of St. Louis and Missouri's own jewels in the Midwest. And my family, I'm proud to say, is also members of the garden. So keeping it all in the family here. What we're going to talk about this morning is not what I'm doing, but the United States mayors of the cities along the Mississippi River, what they're doing for this corridor. Not just Missouri, but also Illinois and the other 8 states that border the Mississippi River from Minnesota to Louisiana, 101 cities have come together to boost this corridor and bring this river up to a state of national priority in line with other major natural assets of the continent, including the Chesapeake Bay, the Great Lakes, the Everglades, the Gulf of Mexico, the Columbia River Basin, and the Colorado. All of those natural resources enjoy significant programs and spending throughout the federal portfolio. And ironically, the Mississippi River, even though it is responsible for 5% of United States GDP, produces most of the river's food supply. Over 40% of the world's food commodities come out of the Mississippi River Basin, and is responsible for over $500 billion in annual revenue for our country, employing over 1.5 million people directly. Mississippi River has no such program like those other natural assets I mentioned, unfortunately. Hopefully, that's going to change. And our mayors came together in 2012 to sort of do something about the benign neglect at a national scale that the Mississippi River was experiencing for about the last 30 years or so. And they have made terrific progress. Before I get into that, just to let you know, who are some of the faces of our mayoral leadership along this river? Well, Mayor Francis Slay of St. Louis was one of our founding member mayors. And in fact, we ended up being headquartered here in the St. Louis area. Our offices are downtown in a city-owned building. So we have a significant St. Louis attachment. Worked out well for me, being from St. Louis, born and raised. I was able to come back home, which Mom and Dad were especially grateful for, not to have me home, but to have their grandchildren nearby, of course. So Francis Slay was one of our founders, and then currently we're led by the mayor of Baton Rouge, Louisiana, and Bettendorf, Iowa. They are our co-chairs, and they are assisted by one mayor representing each of the 10 states along the Mississippi River. For Missouri, that's Mayor Phil Stang of Kimmswick, Missouri. Many of you may know him or have interacted with him. He is a force of nature, and he is a rock star mayor. He actually leads the smallest town on the Mississippi River by population, 164 people. And but he has a huge presence, and his city blooms up to over 125,000 people for some of his outdoor festivals. So he knows how to run logistics. For Illinois, it's Mayor Robert Eastern III of East St. Louis, Illinois, is our Illinois chair. And Robert Eastern is another rock star mayor, and he is meeting the challenges of his town with innovative new solutions to limit his exposure to disasters and give his economy an opportunity to recover and take root and rebuild and restore his infrastructure. I'll get into that and what he's doing in a moment. I'll also talk about some of the things that Phil Stang is doing with his partner mayors all around him. Now, what is it about the Mississippi River exactly that we should be so concerned about? I did talk about the revenue it generates, the 1.5 million people that need it for their job. And I also talked about how much food the basin produces, 40% of the planet's commodity supply. Even more than that, I haven't talked about one of the most kinetic reasons that the Mississippi River is so important, is the 20 million people that drink the water right out of it every day, including everybody in St. Louis. Over 100 million gallons comes out of that river into the St. Louis city's water supply. And it's for 49 other cities up and down the Mississippi River. Those cities too are pulling water directly off the surface for their water supply. And that really comes into when folks ask me, why do you do this job? Why do you care? Isn't the Mississippi River a ditch with just water in it? It's definitely more than that. It's a symbol of America. It's America's original Main Street. It is a critical component of our culture, our heritage, and our history. In fact, you could argue that America's entire standing in the world would not be what it is today without the Mississippi River and the river's ability to move product and supply clean, fresh water to over 8 economies that currently operate on it. So this really is why I do what I do. This is water right out of the Mississippi River. Of course, it's been treated by MSD. And this is the water that my wife drinks, both of my little girls drink every day, and I drink. So this is the future, and we've got to take care of it. And we've got to make sure it's preserved and conserved in the best way possible. So all the infrastructure that goes into that work and all of the economy that is dependent on a freshwater access source, well, that's what our mayors are trying to lift up and trying to restore. $456 billion economy depends on the fresh water every day that the Mississippi River provides. And if we're going to keep that going, most of it is in manufacturing, outdoor recreation and tourism, and agriculture. Those are the top 3 economies operating on the Mississippi River. They are absolutely dependent on a freshwater access. Nobody wants to swim, boat, hunt, paddle, and recreate next to dirty, smelly water. It's got to be clean. The ecology has to be functioning. We need all of that hydrology working and all that aquatic ecology working if we are to have a thriving agricultural economy to keep commodities growing and moving on the water. And most of all, the manufacturing, which is the biggest economy on the Mississippi. A lot of it is based in manufacturing food products. So that agricultural economy and that manufacturing economy are working hand in hand. Why did our mayors come together? Besides noticing the benign neglect that the Mississippi River corridor was getting at a national scale, what else was it? Well, we actually came together in the midst of disaster. Our first meeting was in 2012 here in St. Louis. And during that time, if folks remember, 2012, we had just gotten out of the 2011 200-year floods of the South. We were coming out of the 50-year drought of 2012, and we had just gone through Hurricane Isaac. Hurricane Isaac traveled the length of the Mississippi River from New Orleans all the way to the Quad Cities of Davenport. It spawned flooding and tornadoes here in the St. Louis area as it passed over and kept going north upriver. So in a 400-day period, we had gone through a 200-year flood event, a 50-year drought, and a hurricane that went all the way up to the midsection of the country. Those were significant impacts, all back to back. All told, the dollar value of those impacts was well into $40 billion in actual losses between 2011 and 2012. So our mayors wanted to get a hold of that and knew that they needed to come together and create a chorus, one voice for this corridor. One mayor could get some attention and get a few things done, but 100 mayors from some of America's largest, most iconic cities, like Memphis and New Orleans, St. Louis and Minneapolis, all of those mayors coming together and small town America in between, joining them, would create an extremely powerful voice, one that would be hard to ignore. So since then, our mayors have made tremendous strides in improving this waterway. One, we were part of the effort to recouple farm subsidy insurance payments to conservation performance so that you had to be involved in conservation in order to get the insurance subsidies. Two, we developed a Mississippi River Investment Grant Fund for our cities. Three, we were able to increase investment in pre-disaster mitigation and resilience and adaptation from just $22 million a year for the whole country to over $400 million in a couple of short years. Now, I'm happy to say we've taken that even a step further. Now our resilience and our mitigation spending is in the billions, and we have passed successfully the nation's first Resilience Revolving Loan Fund Act. This is a new, innovative tool for America. Any city, any state can go after it. It's a FEMA program, and it should be available early next year. It's already passed into US law. but for the first time ever, we can now use a revolving loan fund for resilience projects to make this system and all of its natural and built infrastructure that much safer for all of the economies to operate that I just mentioned, and much safer for us to enjoy both drinking the water as well as recreating and touring around and in it. So we've had some pretty big successes. Our mayors have also taken the Mississippi River to the world stage. We led a delegation of mayors from the Midwest to Paris in 2015 for COP21, which is the UN climate meeting, where the Paris Accords were signed. At that same meeting, our mayors signed a river sustainability agreement with Europe, Mexico, and parts of Africa. Since then, our mayors have gone to Rome and Mexico, and we will be going to Scotland in this November for COP26 to expand our agreement. We have river basins representing over 71 countries now, part of our sustainability agreement for major food producing river basins throughout the world. Most of the planet's food supply by far comes from river basins. The Mississippi River Basin is #1 in that ranking. And we actually have the most untapped capacity of all other river basins on the world. 40% of our basin is just sitting there, not producing anything. Wouldn't necessarily want to activate all that either. That would make the price of food bottom out and we'd have a little bit of a crisis. But it's good to know that capacity is there when and if we need it. Now, moving forward, what are our mayors trying to do? Well, every year we come out with a dose of priorities that we try to accomplish. Right now, you may have heard in the news, we've got something called the infrastructure package taking form in the House and the Senate. The House one's a little bit bigger and the Senate one just hit the street yesterday, as a matter of fact. And I'm proud to say that our Resilience Revolving Loan Fund is funded for 5 years in that infrastructure package. That was a hard-won battle, but we got it in there. So that would be some fantastic projects, resilience, adaptation, and mitigation projects that would span corridor wide. Now, what are some of these projects? I keep mentioning projects. I keep mentioning restoring the ecology, making the economy more resilient. What does that actually look like on the ground? Well, in some respects, what it looks like is what's all around me. I'm going to turn this camera a little bit so you can see to the Mississippi River side. If you see out there, right at the ends of my fingers, you'll actually see Missouri Bottoms, the Missouri Bottoms Conservation Area. Where I'm standing right now is also actually part of that major conservation area, which creates a lot of natural flood slack. It helps all of the cities in this region. It takes on water naturally that would otherwise present a danger to cities like Grafton, Illinois, Alton, East Alton, West Alton, Missouri, Madison, Granite City, and Godfrey. And then finally, it would impact some of the Metro East area, East St. Louis, Sauget, and then also down to Jefferson County. So this is where I'm standing right now, natural infrastructure. And it has taken water on and away from our cities very recently. The 2019 flood event was actually our most devastating flood to date. It was the largest flood in the nation's history by duration and scope. Areas from Pennsylvania to Oklahoma, from La Crosse, Wisconsin to southern Louisiana, all flooded. It was truly a basin-wide event. All told, at basin scale, we incurred over $20 billion in actual losses. Of course, this is off the heels of the 2016 flood events, and then the flash droughts of 2017 and 2018. And then, of course, the named storm events that keep hitting the Gulf Coast year after year and grow in intensity. So there is a lot going on climate-wise that we need to mitigate for and prepare for. Another project from the Metro region that I'd like to point out is actually in East St. Louis, in Metro East. Horseshoe Lake. Many of you may have known about Horseshoe Lake or have recreated near it. It's a natural flood storage area. It's a meander scar of the Mississippi River. Horseshoe Lake used to be in the Mississippi River's path, and the river it ebbs and flows, it moves in and out. It moved away from that area over time, and now we have a lake. Well, if we can access that lake and push more of the water that falls behind East St. Louis, trying to get to the Mississippi River naturally and move it into Horseshoe Lake as a natural flood storage area, we keep all that water out of basements. We keep it out of streets, and we preserve and protect major national infrastructure throughout our cities instead of devastating it and putting it underwater. Floods destroy built infrastructure just by a little bit, just by a small flood. Doesn't take much water to be above a street, a roadbed, or in homes to create billions of dollars of devastation. It only takes a little bit. So if we can take that little bit and put it into natural areas instead and hold it and then let it out gradually and create ancillary benefits like more places for people to recreate near water. We can create cleaner water as we put it into marshes and wetlands and low bottom lands. That water can be filtered and clean. We can increase the diversity and supply of the fish and aquatic ecology populations throughout the corridor by doing this. So we have lots of ancillary benefits that come with natural infrastructure, not to mention probably one of the best benefits of all, and that is we don't have to build it, and then we don't have to maintain it. Built implements and built infrastructure like levees and flood walls, though the ones that exist today do provide critical function, and you do have critical national infrastructure behind a lot of those systems, adding more to them actually increases risk. And it's a prospect we can't afford anyway. It is just another piece of infrastructure we'd be saddled with building and maintaining. However, natural infrastructure, much cheaper to build, and we don't have to get saddled with the maintenance costs. Thirdly, it has, like I mentioned, all these other benefits that come along with it, like cleaner water, more opportunities for outdoor recreation and tourism, and better water security for all of our cities, and as well as our agriculture and manufacturing. So that's an example of some of the things that we are trying to do. Another example would be if we were to renature the River des Peres. Other cities have renatured their concrete lined or piped waterways and creeks, and they have created a real estate boom in their towns for doing that. They've created cleaner water. They've drawn more businesses and recreation, and they've made their neighborhoods safer. I'll give you an example. Dubuque, Iowa. If folks have been to Dubuque, Iowa, and have seen the Bee Branch River Project, this was a natural stream that used to make its way from the highlands of Dubuque all the way down to the Mississippi River through the town. But over time, more and more of that waterway got buried and piped. And it created a very dangerous situation where the homes and businesses built on top of those pipes were simply being destroyed. The pipes could not handle the water, and it became the area of the country with the largest natural disaster declarations per capita in the nation. Fast forward, they uncovered all the pipes, they naturally restored the stream, and now what used to be the most undesirable property in the country became one of the most desirable in the state of Iowa, and certainly the city of Dubuque. Everybody wants to be next to this new natural amenity flowing through the middle of the city, and it is gorgeous. And we don't have the disasters anymore because the natural infrastructure mitigates for that much more efficiently at a much larger scale than any of our pipes and pumps ever could do. We can realize projects like that in other cities too, up and down the river. Say the city of New Orleans has a whole slate of resilience projects that they are working on. So does Memphis. St. Paul, Minnesota wants to build a brand new park right along the riverfront next to the old St. Anthony Lock and Dam that's been retired. and that park would also create natural flood storage for their area. So these projects up and down the river, we want to help our mayors with, and we want to coordinate for national resources to make these things happen, and including here in the St. Louis area. I'll end on just a quick note of what folks could do to help our mayors and to help us. Well, one of the things that's critical for us is a new piece of legislation that our mayors have come up with called the SMART Act. That's the Safeguarding the Mississippi River Together Act, named after Ambassador Andrew Young, who's originally from New Orleans area. This SMART Act would create the opportunity for a National Mississippi River Program Office, similar to the one that exists already today for the Great Lakes. And it would be a coordination point for all things Mississippi River at the federal and state level. It would also authorize new grants and new studies to help us build more of this natural infrastructure and protect our critical built infrastructure from more disasters and impacts. So supporting the SMART Act is one thing that folks can do to help our mayors. Another thing that folks can do to help our mayors is reach out to them. Let your mayor know that you support their involvement in MRCTI. Knowing folks care about this work at home is gold to a mayor, because that's what it all comes down to. If you're a local elected official and you hear from your constituents that what you're doing is something that they like, that allows them to keep doing it. They never hear from folks at the local level. It becomes harder and harder to actually justify the time and energy. So those are two critical things that everybody can be part of. I will mention one other thing. The mayors decided to take on plastic pollution and waste in 2018 at our annual meeting in Davenport. This was a new commitment brought about by some changes in our economy and the fact that China was no longer taking our plastic waste anymore. Now this was a problem we owned, and we as cities had to do something about it. And so we also found out between 2015 and 2018 through a group of studies, plastics was making its way into every single piece and layer of our food chain and our water cycle. We were ingesting, drinking the toxins of plastics, and plastics were taking over good portions of the ecology in our ocean, compromising hundreds of thousands of square miles of ocean life and ecology by plastic. Plastic's land-based. It uses rivers to get to the oceans. Well, could be upwards of 40% of the Gulf of Mexico's plastic problem comes out of our Mississippi River, because our Mississippi River drains 31 states in the continental US and 2 Canadian provinces. So that's a lot of land and opportunity for plastic to get into our rivers, get into our Mississippi, get into our Gulf, and finally in our oceans. Our mayors figured we could do something about this. So they came up with a 3-point plan. 1, increase the recycling capacity and waste management capacity of our own cities so that we could have less leaky systems that do more and move more recycled products more efficiently with less waste. 2, really work with industry and government to reduce the amount of dependence in the economy on plastics. When your bathtub is overflowing, yeah, you can open the window and get more buckets to throw the water out, but it'd be really good if you just turned off the faucet. And so with plastics, intensity and the amount of dependency on plastic in our economy can be reduced. And working with industry and government to do that is a major part of our effort. And then 3, maybe most importantly, incentivizing and better structuring the post-consumer waste market. Plastic and other recycled products and post-consumer waste materials, they need someone to buy them. They've got to have a place to go in the economy other than landfills and our rivers. So bolstering, incentivizing, and encouraging the post-consumer waste materials market to turn folks away from virgin material into post-consumer is a big part of the solution. I will mention sort of a number 4, but if you will, it's an overlay over the whole effort. Data, scientific investigation, and research. we really don't have a good handle on all of the plastic waste in this river. It's a massive river. And it, like I said, it's draining a big area of the continental US. So we need a lot more data to tell us, where is all the plastic waste coming from? Where is it collecting inside the corridor? What types of plastic are most prevalent? And whose is it? Who are the companies whose waste we are encountering the most? So we can work directly with them in a solution. We actually unveiled a pilot here in St. Louis that was part of that investigation. We picked 3 cities: Baton Rouge, St. Louis, and St. Paul, Minnesota. And what that investigation entailed was a newly developed cell phone app where anybody could be a citizen scientist and help this corridor-wide effort of cataloging and auditing the plastic waste throughout the entire river valley. When we unveiled that in those three pilot cities over this past spring and the beginning of summer, it was a major success. We were able to determine, where is a lot of this plastic collecting in our cities, why, whose is it, and where is, and what type is it? That's going to help us immensely in development, zoning, and of course, deploying implements to capture and move this plastic waste out of our waterways and into the recycling stream. But most importantly, it equips us with more data and knowledge on how to work with industry to reduce the concentration of plastic coming out of the private sector, period. We all use it, we all depend on it, and that's not going to change. But we may be able to reduce some of that massive concentration, and we may be able to incentivize where we're not buying so much virgin plastic material, but really incentivizing that post-consumer waste market. So another thing you can do, I'll just mention, is use these reusable water bottles, and not the disposable ones. You do finding yourself using a disposable one, please recycle it. Do your best. Keep this out of there and keep the water in it clean and drinkable, empowering our economy. I want to thank everybody and the Botanical Garden for hosting us. And we really look forward to working with all of you in moving this corridor forward, making it one of the most important in the country. Thank you so much.
Well, thank you, Colin. That was a great introduction to your organization and the fantastic work that you all do. Questions are pouring in, so I'm just going to do my best to moderate, and we'll dive in. So the first question came from somebody named Jack. Do you think St. Louis has turned its back on the river?
You know,
a big question.
Yeah, not just St. Louis, but for a very long time, cities throughout the United States were turning their back on their waterways. Throughout the East, the Midwest, and the West and the Southeast, waterways were considered more of a problem, a liability, something you had to contend with. When the steam paddle boat went the way of the dodo, they just were seen as no longer necessary and just a liability. Our cities, St. Louis included, are now turning their attention back to their waterway, and definitely the Mississippi, as their number one asset, their number one draw, their number one opportunity for the future. No longer is it considered by our mayors along the Mississippi a liability and a problem. Now it's considered their future of their town, and the reason that people come from all over the world. I'll just give you 2 quick examples. Mayor Holden, he's the previous mayor of Baton Rouge, served for more than 3 terms, I want to say. He came into his office one day. The mayor of Atlanta, Shirley Franklin, at the time, was standing in his office looking out his window over the Mississippi River, waiting for him to return. He came in and he said, "Oh, hi, Mayor, great that you're here. So glad you could come and visit me. How is Atlanta?" She didn't say a word. She didn't even turn around. Said, "Mayor, is everything okay?" And she, without turning around, said to him, "You know what, Mayor Holden? If I only had that river." That's a true story. And that really was a moment for him in what he had. And then he went to work building one of the nation's largest water campuses and estuary convention centers, which you can go visit today. Thanks to him and the new mayor, Mayor Sharon Weston Broom, our co-chair. So, that's an example of our cities just turning back to the Mississippi. And it's not an easy question to answer, and it takes time. How do we interface better with this river? It's big. It's one of the largest in the world. And it does have a lot of implications, and it can get expensive. And there's a bit of a learning curve. So, but that is a priority of our mayors to re-embrace this waterway and make it all it could be. Viking River Cruises, you may have all heard, is going to unveil a Mississippi River product in about a year and a half, hopefully. Viking doesn't spend $100 million on every boat unless they are darn sure that that investment is going to pay back. They did extensive research, surveying and interviewing on where they're asking all their customers from all over the planet, and those they didn't even have, where should our next product be? Where should we unveil new boats? The Mississippi River was top of that list worldwide. Everybody wants to come see this river. It has as big a following, if not bigger, than the Grand Canyon globally. So we need to make good on that, and our mayors are intent on doing it.
That's certainly some good perspective, isn't it, from maybe outsiders. How much influence does the barge industry have historically and currently on government policy towards the river, and how does your organization interact with the barge industry?
Sure. So the private sector as a whole has a lot to offer and is an important partner in this river because of all the economy I mentioned, right? The barge industry is a member of our corporate advisory board. So our mayors set up in 2015 a way to interact in a circle of trust. Private sector actors that share our priorities, want to improve the corridor, make this a better place to live. The barge industry, so Ingram Barge is a member of our corporate advisory board, JF Brennan Marine, SCF Marine, which is headquartered in St. Louis. They're all members of our corporate advisory board. They want to help us build this economy sustainably, cleanly, and with the ecology as a priority, while at the same time keeping the jobs and moving the product. Our mayors depend on our ports. To answer the question directly, the navigation industry, so not just barges, but dockside outfitters, port operators, as well as those moving commodities and the intermodal industry that supports. That's a big industry, and it's represented in part by the Waterways Council. And the Waterways Council is, I like to say, a great partner of ours. Don't always agree on everything, but we do agree on this river is a priority, and we need to work together to lift it in such a way that we keep the jobs, we keep the economy, but don't compromise the ecology. We are dependent on that ecology working, and we're going to need more of that natural infrastructure if we're going to really make a systemic difference in the amount of exposure we have to the natural disasters we are experiencing at an elevated and persistent level. And so, they have been working with us. They are very influential. It is a powerful industry that a lot of folks listen to, including Congress, and they should, because they have a lot of economy, they have a lot of jobs, a lot of people behind them. So that makes sense. Our mayors are working directly with them to lift mutual solutions.
Great. How are you following up on the pilot projects in the spring to continue collecting data along the waterways? Are you collecting data of plastic traveling on the water?
Yes, we are. So the partners that are involved in our plastic pollution initiative are the University of Georgia. University of Georgia worked with the Department of Commerce to develop the cell phone app, specifically NOAA, National Geographic on public awareness and education, and the United Nations. So the United Nations actually provided us the grants to get this all started and to do all 3 pilot projects in cities. They were pilots. So we wanted to see how would this go? What were the challenges? And could we deploy it at a larger level? we're cataloging the challenges and meeting them. It went wonderfully. It had a ton of public support, world round, I want to say, because the same app has been deployed in Europe and along the Indus River in India successfully. Now we want to take it to more cities. So we want to put it in, right now they're working with the Quad cities to deploy the app there. And from that point forward, we want to take it on an exponential level where we can deploy it more broadly corridor wide. What that looks like and what it'll evolve, I can't say specifically yet. That is all being assembled. We just finished the 3 pilots on the river earlier this year. Well, actually earlier this summer. So the reports for that aren't even finished yet. So it is a process, but we are going to deploy it in the Quad cities next, and probably a city in the south at the same time or shortly thereafter, and then take it to a whole other level where we can get lots of cities on board at the same time.
Great.
To mention, are we watching how plastics move downriver? Yes. So the University of Georgia developed these plastic bottles that have tracking devices in them. They are satellite linked, and we let them go in all 3 cities going upriver. And now we're following them all the way down to the mouth of into the Gulf of Mexico. We're cataloging where they get hung up. They never get hung up typically alone. They usually have lots and lots of company wherever they get hung up, unless they get sucked into the ballast water of a barge or something like that, which does happen. But we just go retrieve it, get it out, we send it on its way again. So we are cataloging all of those routes that plastic waste is finding itself into our Mississippi.
And if a citizen scientist wants to kind of sign up for updates about, getting involved in that project when it goes live again, what's the best thing to do?
Yeah, so you can actually go and download the app today, and Great. You can put it to work for you. So go to marinedebristracker.com, and that's the name of the app. I know it marine, people think of oceans, but it's called because it was developed originally for ocean. Yeah. Marine Debris Tracker, and simply click on the Mississippi River product, and you can put that into your phone. You can go out anywhere you encounter, doesn't have to just be plastic, any kind of waste along the waterways or nearby. You can catalog. All of it is helpful to the data and to what we're trying to do. Great,
fantastic. So there's a question, you mentioned the River Des Peres. Will the River Des Peres ever become like Minnehaha Creek in Minneapolis?
Yeah, or the B Branch in Dubuque.
Yeah, the one you mentioned.
Yeah, we hope so. It has shown to work as a method of restoration. Ripping out all that concrete and renaturing a waterway like that, it just has lots of benefits. It's got to be done right, and it's got to be done using the science as a metric and a guide. But we'd love to see it happen, and hopefully we will in the not too distant future.
Well, and speaking of that, how does your organization prioritize projects along the river? Of course, maybe being based in St. Louis, and are partial to some local projects, but how do you really prioritize how you spend your resources, your time, and your dollars?
Yeah, so a lot of our time and resources are spent on things that have national policy implications, things that we can get done through Congress. As an association, our mayors can carry some things through their states, but unfortunately, at least not yet, we don't have the staff and the expertise to move state legislation or state policy from start to finish. That really does require some local capacity that we just don't have in all 10 states. So we really concentrate a lot on the US House and Senate and the federal administration, the agencies in the White House. And the things that we can relate to them as having really broad impacts, like more natural infrastructure, disaster mitigation, resilience, adaptation, and then protecting the economies that don't just operate on our waterway, but operate on a lot of the waterways, the major tributaries of the Mississippi, like the Ohio, the Missouri, the Illinois, the Red River, both Red Rivers, North and South, the Arkansas River. You can implicate a lot of that, then you get a lot of federal and congressional attention. That tends to drive a lot of our policy effort.
Yeah.
When it gets down to the project level, what do? Well, we just signed an agreement with Ducks Unlimited out of Memphis. Everybody's probably aware of Ducks Unlimited, one of the world's foremost conservation organizations, certainly one of the top in the country. We went to them, and we told them, hey guys, we noticed that you're restoring some wetlands. This was in the St. Louis area, as a matter of fact, that actually could help some of our cities in the St. Louis metro region. Could we work with you? And that conversation that was focused around here turned into them saying to us, we do this all over. Is there other places we could do this work with you? Because they saw an instant potential, as did we, of, hey, if it's good for ducks, it might be good for natural flood storage too. And DU would no longer just have, not that they do just have one, but one major motivation. They would have all of us helping them with all of their projects too, as an additional motivation, could really help them out, and they could help us out. So they are right now working with us to determine a whole slate of natural infrastructure projects up and down the river that we could deploy. And what's driving those is, okay, is it good for ducks? Because it's, that's them, that's what they do, it's in their name. Two, is it scalable where, we can do it without $100 million? Can we do it at a scale that's easily achieved within the near term? And three, does it actually mitigate for disasters? Does it actually create storage for some of these impacts, not just flooding, but also droughts and storms? And so those are the three main drivers. We're actually going to, we just signed the agreement with them in March. And now this September, next month, we're going to unveil where our initial pilot projects with them will be, and what they will be, and what they will work to accomplish. So that gives you an idea on how we decide local projects and what's driving a lot of this. We have 101 cities that are part of our association, and we have a two-pronged mandate. Help all of our mayors together sing as a chorus around the things that lift our whole corridor. And we also work as an extension of the staff of our cities to help them with their own local projects at home as best we can, that we have the capacity for. So also deciding what we do depends on the mayor, him or herself, coming to us and saying what's important to them, and what are they trying to accomplish. And we are mandated to help work with them on that. So that gives you an idea of of the way we work inside.
Great. So you talked about plastic bottles. Here's a question. Missouri has legislation to prevent initiatives to ban plastic bags. So how do we address this? How is your organization involved in that, in trying to mitigate the use of plastic bags as well as bottles?
Yeah, so there are several states with plastic bag bans. It's illegal in those states, like here, to pass a law banning plastic bags, if you can imagine that. So what we did is we worked with the National Caucus of Environmental Legislators, NCEL, to, this was in 2018, to create a state task forces that would be created by state legislators to determine what is the best way to either defeat those or get around them in different ways, where we can reduce the dependency on plastic bags and dependency on plastic bottles, increase the incentives for takebacks and recycling, all of those things. So that work is ongoing at the state level with state legislators. We do believe we are making a dent. I'm not sure, I don't have the the skinny on Missouri specifically, but other states, we are starting to make progress around that in Iowa and Minnesota and now Wisconsin. States that have other assets that can benefit, like if you're a Great Lakes state, those tend to be the states that are really motivated around stuff like that. But Missouri is one of the top states in the union for river frontage. In fact, I saw that we were the top state because you got to count both sides of the river.
Right.
So, I think our state has a big incentive to work to reduce those impacts. And our mayors would definitely like to see that happen. But again, that is a state legislative prospect. Our mayors are looking at where they can institute statutory changes at home if state law allows them to.
Yeah.
Many times our mayors are very hemmed up in not being able to do much at home because it's against state law around plastic. Sunsetting those, changing them, finding workarounds, and just working directly with industry are ways that we are coming together to mitigate for that.
Great. Just a couple more. So glad you're addressing plastic pollution. I'm concerned about food waste entering landfills in cities and towns along our river. Is there a plan to begin to reduce organics entering landfills?
Yeah, so that is one we haven't got to at scale yet. It is a valid concern for sure. We've been a little preoccupied with disasters as of late and mitigating for those. And we've got a bit of an infrastructure decay problem. But as I'm sure you're all aware, with the closing of the Hernando de Soto Bridge just recently, earlier this summer in Memphis, due to a crack in that bridge, that actually cost the nation a couple $100 million in lost economic activity while that thing was shut down. We're going to be seeing more of that in the not too distant future if we don't have an infrastructure package. So we've been sort of concentrating on that. Oddly enough, the United Nations did approach us for a food waste effort, and that is something that we are exploring, and we hope to be able to. Again, it just comes to staff and capacity. Sure. We hope to be able to get to that. I will also mention, just because it's wet doesn't mean it's important to us. So we do other types of infrastructure for our cities. We work on broadband. Through the pandemic, we've been working on medical supplies and security and facilities for vaccine distribution and storage for vaccines. So actually, a lot of the work we've been doing the last year and a half has been around the pandemic and helping get the vaccines to our smaller cities and get everybody PPE. I have mayors where their only supply of PPE came from MRCTI.
Wow.
Came from, especially in the beginning of the pandemic, it was all they had is what we sent them in terms of gowns, masks, thermometers, and sanitation, fluids. So hand washing. So we've been working a lot on that. Thankfully, hopefully here, God willing, as the pandemic sunsets and we get a better handle on it, we can now turn more capacity to these things like organic food waste.
Yeah, great. Okay, and here's another one. This is from Peter. Hi, Colin. Great to hear your presentation. You mentioned the importance of floodplain in responding to floods, but there are many projects to protect cities that used to be floodplain with levees, etc. Should we emphasize the maintenance of wetlands rather than protect development?
Yes, and we are. So wetlands, marshes, forests, reconnected backwater, and reconnected floodplain are a critical component of our infrastructure plan. Our mayors really don't see the solution at scale being within their cities. We'll do what we can within our cities, but the footprint of our cities is a match head compared to the vastness of the agricultural land throughout the basin. And if we can reactivate key areas to take on impacts with making sure our farmers remain whole, that they don't suffer any economic detriment, and making sure that we don't put anybody else at risk, that's what we are trying to do. it's not an easy prospect. Most of the land along the Mississippi River is privately owned. Not much of it is federal or city or county or state. So there is a big implication here with working with private landowners on easements, conservation, and opening the land up just through purchase to take on water, and working with states, farmers, and the commodity organizations. When you take land out of production, or you have land that's sitting there to keep it out of production, that is a coordinated exercise that takes a lot of different parties at the table. But that's what mayors do, right? We're not experts, we're mayors. Our job is to bring the experts to the table so that progress can be made. And a lot of times you need a lot of actors to make something happen, especially when you're implicating private land, because a lot of land rights come into play. A lot of state regs and statutes come into play that have to be addressed. But we're doing that. That's exactly what we're doing with Ducks Unlimited, and our agreement with them to deploy a lot of this is working with those different stakeholders and parties to make this happen. There's no way we're going to restore.
Oh, looks like we might have lost your audio. There you go.
Can you hear me?
Yep, you're good.
Okay, incoming call. There's no way we're going to restore all 80% of the wetlands that we've ripped out over the last 120 years. But if we can restore wetlands in key areas to get the biggest bang for the buck in terms of diversity, ecology, and storage and buffering of impacts, that's what we're trying to do. And hopefully build it from there as we go forward.
Great. Well, a final question. It's sort of fitting. Does your organization need or want volunteers, or what should people at home, if they want to get involved in bettering, the Mississippi River, what should they do? If they can't volunteer with your organization, what do you suggest?
Well, so downloading the app, the Marine Debris Tracker app, and using that when you can, where you can, communicating with your mayor that this is important to you, whenever, wherever you can. Supporting the SMART Act, we call it the SMART Act, the Safeguarding the Mississippi River Together Act, are all key things that you can definitely do. But there's another organization that we work with called the Mississippi River Network. They are an umbrella group of all the environmental organizations along the river. They are working to deploy volunteers at a local level throughout the corridor. They're a great organization to work with. And then I would say also just doing what you can to make sure that we keep plastic waste out of the corridor. So if your employer is engaged in recycling or collecting plastic waste, or wants to do cleanups in the area with the app, cleanups are great. We love cleanups, but we need to take cleanups to a new level. And using cleanups, especially if they're regularly scheduled, to get data that's critical to managing the whole corridor, that is a whole other level of operation that can help us. So if your employer or your group does cleanups, use the app, bring the app along, deploy it to everybody in the group. That way we can get more and more of that data accumulated, and that can equip us with what we need to really clean this up at a systemic level.
Great. Well, thank you so much for joining us. Thanks to everybody at home. It looks like a lovely day to be on the river, so I hope that's how everybody spends their afternoon, or at least out and about. Any final comments from you, Colin?
Only that I want to thank everybody in the Botanical Garden again for inviting us. And I will say this, all our mayors will be here in St. Louis next September of 2022 for our 10th anniversary annual meeting.
Wonderful.
So, we hope to engage the garden.
Please do, yes.
And hopefully everybody that's on the line today can be part of that too.
Wonderful. Well, thank you. We'll look forward to that. And again, thanks everyone. We'll see you next month, September 14th. We'll be back at 11 with Kim from Forest Keeling to talk about plants and shrubs and trees, I should say. So we'll see you then. Bye, Colin. Enjoy the rest of your day there on the river.
Will do. Thank you. Bye,
Bye-bye.
everybody.